Great. So Chris, would you like to get started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. This is part of our series, Solutions to Plastic Pollution, that is in partnership with a number of organizations. I hope I don't forget anyone, but Plastic Pollution Coalition, Public Citizen, Surfrider, help me out, who am I missing here? Anyway, we've been doing this for about 2 years, and we have these webinars roughly once a month. We take a few months off here and there, but I thank everyone for joining us today. And my name is Chris Wilkie. I'm the Global Advocacy Manager here at Waterkeeper Alliance, and we are in for a treat because we have two fantastic presenters. We're going to do a fact check on big plastics. So while we often talk about solutions to plastic pollution, what we're going to be discussing today are really the false solutions and false claims that are being put out by the plastics industry. And with our two presenters, we have an action-packed agenda, so I want to get out of the way here. And we'll just tell you, I'll introduce them both real generally, but I'll invite them each to tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll start off with Jan Dell, who is the founder of Last Beach Cleanup. She's a retired professional chemical engineer and has worked with a variety of industries on implementing sustainable business and climate resiliency. We'll hear from Jan, and then we'll go over to Monica Wilson, who is, get her title here, she is the Associate Director and Global Programs Coordinator at GAIA, which is the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. And I'll invite each of them to say a little bit about themselves as they get started. We'll turn it over to Jan now. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up? Good. One of my younger son once said that my voice sounds like 20,000 screaming banshees. So I hope it doesn't sound like that, but that's of course what a younger son would say when I was probably screaming at him like a banshee. It's great to talk with you today because the plastics industry, the products industry, and all the NGOs they fund, and the entire mafia is really flooding us with false facts that they've been flooding us with really for decades. And so I've taken the effort to really find the facts and document that this is what they're saying, and this is the truth, you know, just sort of like the political reporters did during the last election, right? And I created a Word document, which I'm happy to share with anybody. And on one of the BFFP calls, Chris saw it and said, oh, will you come and give this as a presentation? So I took the time to turn it into a PowerPoint. And this doesn't have all the details, but I hope it's a little bit more compelling reading. I am delighted that Monica is going to talk about GAIA's work in this realm because they've really done deep dives into chemical recycling. And I'm just going to watch my phone because I can't see the time on the clock, so to make sure that I don't take up so much time. So the purpose of my presentation today is to show you the 9 top sound bites that the plastics industry and all their friends are using, and to show you the truth so that we can all spread the truth louder than they're spreading the propaganda. Let's see if I click this. Okay, so here's the 9 false claims. And actually, one of the things I'm interested in, everybody, is what other claims are you seeing that we can fact check? Because these are just, there's more than this, but these are the 9 that I've seen over and over again. I see them so often in their press releases that I think that they must have a chart in the offices of the American Chemistry Council with their people's names and these false claims, and people get stars every time they work them into an interview. Just a little bit of history. I am a chemical engineer. I've worked with everybody in this whole sector. And now I'm working on the other side, all the way from oil and gas to all the plastics chemistry. Way back in the day, I even did a consulting project for what was the American Chemistry Council at the time. So I know what their tactics are. I used to write this tactics and strategy, but always on good things, just to let you know. And when I saw them in around 2018 start to spew this lie that all plastics are recyclable and there is this circular economy of plastics, I was in the corporate conversation saying, no, this is not true. And they decided to keep going with this. And I said, okay, I'm tapping out and I'm going on the other side to bring the facts and figures to stop the falsehoods. Number one, they still like to say plastic recycling is new and it should be given more time. Two, the American Chemistry Council loves to say that petrochemical company members, and that's who their members are, as well as all of their friends, the accounting companies, the McKinseys, everybody who makes money off of the petrochemical companies, they like to say that they're investing over $7 billion in plastic recycling. Not true. They like to say that advanced recycling is a new process. Nope. It's an old process and it's never worked. One of the main claims is that advanced recycling can magically handle all this mixed plastic consumer waste that comes in our recycling bins that goes to MRFs, can't be shipped to China anymore. And advanced recycling can magically take it. Not true. They say pyrolysis is not incineration. Not true. They love to talk about the climate advantages. It's not true at all. Wait till you see this one. I got to talk fast so I can get to this graphic. They're saying that advanced recycling makes circular products. Nope. And they like to talk about the 7 operating advanced recycling facilities, and they even claim that they're recycling millions of tons. Flat out lie. And then lastly, this is a bit tech, but they say this pyrolysis oil that's made from these magical facilities can be made into food grade plastics. No, it's actually low quality. So let's go through these. I'm going to do it pretty quick and hopefully we'll have time to talk at the end. Here's the number one, and you're going to see this guy's picture a lot. It's the same cast of characters over and over. Here we are. These are very new statements that I'm showing all in the last 6 months. So I'm not digging up old stuff. This is stuff they're still saying. He just gave an article, an interview with Political, which looked like a paid piece to me. And he said, yeah, plastics recycling is still in its infancy. No, not true. 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, starting in 1990, when the last time people really cared about plastic waste, all the big petrochemical companies lined up and gave testimony to Congress and saying they would start up their own plastic recycling facilities. Plastic recycling is a solution to plastic pollution. About 15 facilities were announced. Only one survives today. Most weren't built, the rest went bankrupt. So they've been spouting recycling as a solution to plastic waste for more than 30 years. Not an infant, old, failed process. Here's just an article from 1993. Where, it full on states that plastic manufacturers are not living up to the recycling claims. It's quoting a plastic recycler who went into the business to do this, and he ended up going bankrupt because there was no market, because new plastic was so much cheaper. So no, it's an old process that they've been claiming will work, like paper and metal. Hasn't ever worked. Okay. Their claim that they're in the petrochemical company members are investing $7 billion in plastic recycling. Well, first of all, let's remember that they're investing over $200 billion into new plastics plants. So even if they were investing $7 billion, it would be a tiny amount. It would definitely not be enough to recycle all that plastic, but they're not investing $7 billion. I worked with Greenpeace 2 years ago, 2020, and we got the list. We got this, they've been talking about this list of projects. We got the list from somebody and we went through each single project that they had listed. Most of them didn't exist. Some of them were like incineration, and a lot of taxpayer funding was involved. And actually there was like less than $1 billion of direct investment by the petrochemical industry. I think it was less than 500 million, honestly. So it's not true. And we actually debunked this. We published this report, Deception by Numbers. And GAIA also has been publishing reports with these lists showing these projects aren't real. And it kills me that to this day, all of that truth is ignored and the plastics industry continues with their false myth. Okay, now they're saying advanced recycling is a new process. We hear this over and over again by the American Chemistry Council, by greenwashers like GreenBiz, and I've known Joel Mackauer for 30 years, and I'm disgusted with the way GreenBiz greenwashes this and promotes the circular economy of plastics. In fact, he just did this big article about Eastman's moonshot goal of using methanolysis. Well, they proposed that in 1991 and never built the plant. So this is just old hoaxing and charades that are just proposed over and over again. And in fact, okay, in 2018, CP Chem, which is a major maker, they're Chevron and Phillips 66 make CP Chem. They make polyethylene and a lot of other plastics. Their guy said, oh yeah, advanced recycling is like a moonshot. And first we need to do plastic to fuel, but then we'll get to plastic recycling. And they made it all sound all high tech. Well, no. They've been talking about chemical recycling, pyrolysis, methanolysis for more than 30 years. In 1991, Eastman, the same Eastman that GreenBiz is talking about doing something now as a moonshot, talked about it in 1991, never built the plant. Never operated. And now what do you see? Headlines over and over and over about the same type of plant, and it never worked. So again, 30 years of false claims. Okay, this is a big one, team. This is what we all need to know and be able to counter. Advanced recycling cannot magically handle this mixed mess of plastic waste that's still being put in curbside bins. And all the plastics mafia wants to tell us is recyclable. They say it over and over again. Joshua Baca says it over and over again from the ACC. This can magically handle mixed plastic waste. Well, no. Read Joe Brock's expose in Reuters. He won a lot of awards, he and his co-authors last year. I helped him write this, and it shows that the Renewlogy plant that they touted, which was pyrolysis in Salt Lake City, shut down because of contamination. There is PVC and PET in household waste. You cannot separate it all out, and that chokes pyrolysis units. That was also mentioned in James Brugger's article on Sunday about the Brightmark plant, which hasn't started up. And here is one of the few pyrolysis plants that is operating in the US. It's a small facility called Nexus, and you see them talked about all the time. They are using pyrolysis for clean plastic film. Look at that picture. That's a picture from their own website of what they're recycling. That's not mixed household waste. And oh, by the way, mechanical recycling could work on that. So they're taking clean film from the back of stores and recycling it, pyrolysis, burning part of it, getting some oil out, but claiming at the same time that ACC is claiming this is mixed plastic waste. This is a complete falsehood. One of the major things we have to talk about to kill the myth. They like to say pyrolysis is not incineration. They want it regulated just as a manufacturing facility. But as James Brugger's article yesterday in Inside Climate or Sunday also pointed out, the Brightmark facility, what would be the biggest pyrolysis facility in the world, if it ever starts operating, would burn 70% of the plastic waste to heat the vessels. Okay, what is pyrolysis? You take plastic waste, but you can't have PET, you can't have PVC, you can only have olefins, that's an LDPE, an HDPE, a PP, into a vessel. They heat it up in I'd say 500 here, but Brightmark's, it was 900 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. They heat it up and basically gasify off some of the hydrocarbons. Well, they take that gas and they burn 70% of it to keep it heated at 900 degrees, okay? When you hear the word heat, it means that energy is needed. And they aren't going to go buy natural gas. You can't get there off renewables. I mean, you can't use electricity. So they have to burn the plastic waste in order to get the temperature up. And that is incineration, my friends. And the vessel itself isn't, the pyrolysis vessel itself isn't incinerating, and which is the ACC's argument, but the vessel right next to it is combusting the gas that came off. So in fact, Brightmark had a fire. Brightmark even had, when they tried to start up, they have a flare on the corner of the property. My husband and I took 3 hours to drive over there when we were in Indiana in May. It's not operating. We saw on the flare on the side, it still hasn't started operating. So yes, it is incineration of waste to run this facility. They like to say plastics are lighter, and so they're better from climate. Now that's a complete falsehood, because if you think about shipments coming anywhere, it's always volume limited. It's not waste limited. Look what's in an Amazon delivery or a truck going down the down the road. It's not that they weigh too much, it's how much you can fit in. And so a plastic cup is the same volume whether it's paper or whether it's plastic. So that's a complete falsehood. And big snaps to Beyond Plastics for publishing this report last year on the new coal. And you can read more about that, plastics are the new coal. And so much of it is incinerated. None of their LCAs take that to an example. Okay, this is the one I really wanted to get to. They like to say that advanced recycling is circular, and that if you make a cup out of advanced recycling, it makes it circular. It's totally false. It's so ridiculously false. Okay, this is what they want us to believe. I made this graphic. You've got your fast food company. They serve you this McDonald's cup, polypropylene 5. They say, oh, you can put that in your recycling bin. It will go to a magical sortation place that will then go to a magic factory, this pyrolysis factory, which will make some oil, and then we'll make plastic cups again, and it'll go all the way around. That cup is circular. That is literally what they are claiming right here. Here it is on the web right now. This is a total lie. Okay, Berry is one of the worst companies in all of this. And if they get a link to hear this, they already know I think that, because I've gone up to them at conference and say, you are lying about your plastic lids being recyclable. And they just shrug. So Berry claims that this cup, this polypropylene cup that they're making is recyclable. They sell it to Wendy's. Wendy's is part of the scam. Wendy's then says, oh yeah, this cup is recyclable. It's going to go to consumer recycling. It's going to get separated, and it's going to go to a magic pyrolysis and then go to LyondellBasell. They're going to take this pyrolysis oil, put it as part of new plastic production, make the cup and go around again. It's completely false. If you look at 375 MRFs in America today, less than I think 4 still accept plastic cups. No one accepts plastic cups because they're not recyclable. So they're not taking those plastic cups back around to make the cup. What are they taking? They're taking that plastic film you saw in the last photo, right? At Nexus, they're taking clean commercial scrap and making the oil to make into the cup. So what's really happening is this, and yeah, this is a crazy thing, and this could take a whole half an hour to explain, but what they're really doing is taking very clean, wide spec resin, industrial scrap, pallet wrap, agricultural wrap, used cooking oil, and they're putting that into the Nexus plant. They're not taking household waste. They make a bit of pyrolysis oil. They add a lot of new oil. It goes to a big petrochemical facility and it becomes a plastic cup. And then it goes out, and what happens? It becomes litter or waste or is incinerated. None of those plastic cups are coming back around again. Why? Because pyrolysis, none of these facilities can handle mixed post-consumer plastic waste. This one is so galling. McDonald's is using vegetable oil to make some plastic cups, 50% vegetable oil on their website, and they're trialing them in Savannah, Georgia. On their website, they say, luckily for us, it's this simple. In Savannah, you can just rinse the cup and put it in your recycle bin and it'll get recycled. Look at you doing your part. It's completely false. You go on the city of Savannah's recycling site, They don't want plastic cups. You can't recycle plastic cup in Savannah. And look how McDonald's is lying. In fact, in Savannah, they have a contamination fee. So if you did that and put those cups in your recycling bin, you could get hit with a contamination fee. This is the extremity of their extremeness of the absolute greenwashing of plastic recycling in general, and then the so-called circularity of this advanced recycling stuff. The other thing that they're lying about is that there are these huge already in advanced recycling, there's these huge commercial scale. They'll say commercial scale about 1 drop of oil. They just use the word. And that they're operating, and Joshua Baca says millions of tons per year are being recycled this way. Well, thanks to NRDC, who did the map of the exact plastic so-called advanced recycling facilities that are going on right now. This shows here, they did a great report. I helped them with it and checked and fact checked and pointed out Brightmark's not operating. Right now, there are 6 very, very small pyrolysis and solvent, Agilyx is pyrolysis. Yeah, they're all aquafil as a depolymerization. It's just for carpet anyway. So there's only 5 that allegedly take post-consumer plastic waste, but they don't. None of them do. Agilyx, GAIA did a great report. They have to take very, very clean polystyrene. Okay, so they're not taking mixed plastic waste. But if you add up what the capacities of each of these factories are, and I went and did all the research, there's links that show to the original articles and so on. There's only the capacity if they're running, and I actually don't think they're all running. I'm planning to drive by New Hope Energy in October and see if it's turned on. I don't think a lot of these are actually operating. There's only 121,000 tons per year, which is 0.24% of the 50 million tons per year of plastic waste. So advanced recycling is not working. Brightmark can't get their plant started up because they don't have clean feedstock. PureCycle is one that we're fighting because they're trying to push a plastic trash sorting plant into Florida, into an EJ community. This is a totally unproven solvent process that is really just a get rich quick stock play. And though none of those can take mixed plastic waste either. And even if you added in the capacities of this, you're still not even at 1% of the plastic waste. So they talk about this like this is the solution and we should wait for it. But what we found out is, yeah, they've been talking about it for 30 years. And it's an absolute trivial amount of plastic waste that's getting processed. And then lastly, and I'm right on time here, they say, oh, the oil that comes out can be just dropped in and made into new plastic. No, it's not true at all for pyrolysis. Nestle is one of the big promoters of the scam, and they say you have to have intermediate facilities. And that's because the plastic waste going into these aren't clean, right? There's different additives and dirt and metals and all kinds of stuff. And so there's in the oil that's made, even though they fractionate it into different parts, there's still contaminants. And so there actually needs to be more processing of it before it can really become a plastic feedstock. So in summary, we need to have facts over fiction. We need to keep calm and keep telling the truth, but we really need to shout. We need to shout louder with the truth than they are with their propaganda. Plastic recycling has been promoted for 30 years and it's largely failed. Beyond Plastics and I published a report which was confirmed by the US DOE. We're only recycling about 5% of US plastic waste. The American Chemistry Council is not, and their member companies are not investing in this because it's a money loser. So they're not. Advanced recycling is an old process. Advanced recycling, chemical recycling cannot be this magical solution to mix household plastic waste. There's too many different types of plastics, too many different additives. Pyrolysis plants incinerate the waste to heat the vessels. That is incineration. It should be regulated as such. These plants have fires all the time. Of course, it should be regulated as an incinerator. Plastics aren't beneficial from a climate perspective when so much goes to incineration, and that's extremely carbon spewing. The products made from advanced recycling are not circular. Just because they put a drop of pyrolysis oil in the front end and maybe met a recycled content mandate, which I don't support because this is how they're going to fake us, the product they're making is not recyclable. Today, there's only about 6 small facilities running with a trivial amount of production. And then the oil that they make from pyrolysis is low quality and is going to require more refining, which means more toxic emissions and so on. And with that, I'm on time and on schedule to hand it over to Monica. And I look forward to what Monica has to say. Thank you for your attention.
Do you want to just go ahead and take it, Monica? And I'm tracking some of the questions in the chat, and we can circle back at the end and answer the questions.
Sounds great. Okay, Jan, if you could stop sharing, then I can start.
Okay. Oh, I thought I did stop. Stop share. Oh, I found the button.
There you
Yay.
go. All right, here we go. Beautiful. Okay. Just give me one more second here. Great. Okay, so my name is Monica Wilson. I've had the pleasure of working for GAIA, just the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, for 20 years now. And we do feel like the plastic industry is still trying to take us for a ride. This is a graphic from Zero Waste Europe, which is GAIA in Europe. GAIA is a global network. And over the years, we've tracked a lot of different proposals with the same technologies that are now being called chemical recycling, as Jan just explained: gasification and pyrolysis. Member organizations, which are all independent grassroots organizations, have tracked companies from country to country and done solidarity actions to stop facilities that have been chased out of one country from being built in another. Dozens of incinerators trying to use gasification and pyrolysis have been blocked over the decades. These are the same technologies that the plastic industry is now saying, brand new technology, we've got the solution. So I just want to start there with, just as Jen said, this is not new, this is old. This is not, this is taking something and repackaging it, which the industry is really good at doing, and giving us the same show that we've seen before. So I see a lot of folks in this webinar who know so much about plastic. I don't even want to show you several of these slides, but just in case, so we all have common grounding, if plastics were a country, it would be one of the top 5 most polluting country for climate pollution. So obviously we care about plastic and stopping plastic because we want to address and do everything we can to stop climate change. We care about plastic pollution because production is off the charts and out of control. And we care about plastic pollution because the industry has no solution. So the recycling rates, which is that light blue line that Jen already covered, are really, really low compared to how much plastic is generated. And so, you all are on this webinar and you all probably do work on this all the time, and you're aware that that the public and policymakers are wising up to the problems of plastic, the industry is feeling the heat to change its ways, and the logical and rational response would be to cut plastic production. But that's certainly not what industry's response is. They say, wait, no problem, we have a new thing. We can handle this. So here's another way of thinking about the point that industry is at this moment. Or the point that industry is asking us to be at. So, of course, the fossil fuel industry chooses the magic recycling button, the quote unquote recycling button. They're investing billions of dollars and have invested billions of dollars over the years to try to make this stuff work. And they still really can't. So when facilities are being proposed, they're not actually often being built. When facilities are actually being built, they're not doing what they say they're doing. And as Jen already showed, and I'll get into it in a little bit more detail, the result of those facilities is a lot of combustion, a lot of pollution. And you can probably guess where industry is locating these facilities: in Black communities, brown communities, indigenous communities, low-income communities, communities that are already disproportionately impacted by toxic exposures, by all sorts of different types of toxic facilities, and by other waste management facilities. So instead of choosing make less plastics, which to us seems like the obvious choice, industry is really doubling down on magic recycling tech. I think this slide helps a little bit. We could spend a long time on here, but we're not. What I want you to notice here is when you burn something, if it's a match or anything else, pyrolysis and gasification are part of combustion. They're part of burning, period. So if we start with that framework, at the bottom layer in the gray, we see pyrolysis of the wood. Then you see the gasification. That happens in any combustion. And when we think about the industry's word games of, well, we're just using pyrolysis and gasification, it's not incineration, we have to remember those are stages of incineration. Those are stages of burning. So we have to make sure that we're not being conned by the wordplay. I think this might be, I think Jen might have shown something kind of similar to this, but what I want us also to remember is that plastic waste going into any sort of facility like this is going to have toxic additives, flame retardants, plasticizers, could have heavy metals. There's all sorts of contaminants, PFAS, right? So you put something like that into the first stage of an incineration process of heating it, you can't destroy it. It's not going to go anywhere else but forward or out. Okay, so you're going to get toxic materials coming out in the char, in the solid waste that comes out of the first chamber, then in water that comes out of cleaning, then in more water emissions, then in air emissions. So all along the not the life cycle, but all along this facility, there's going to be toxic emissions coming out in the air, in the water, and in the solid waste that is left over. Not to mention whatever sort of oil and gases are left over that then get burnt. That's what we found. That's what NRDC has found. That's what Jan has found as we've really dug into industry claims about their operations. Excuse me a minute. And the other piece to remember is that there's a lot of energy use. Remember, climate is one of the reasons that we, or at least I, am motivated to work and to stop plastic and the overproduction of plastic, but there's a huge amount of energy used in these facilities. That means there's a huge amount of carbon emissions, and what you get at the end of the day is a lot of combustion. So one of the other things that I think is really important from the NRDC report that Jan mentioned, and I shared the link in the chat to everybody, is they did an analysis of the facilities using so-called chemical recycling that are mostly gasification or pyrolysis in the US. They found large quantities of hazardous waste. They found hazardous waste that goes to another facility that gets burned. And they often found that in many cases, the communities were disproportionately people of color or low income or both. And that the majority of these facilities are not recycling. There's nothing left over to make into new plastic. The majority of them are incineration, either on site or at another facility. So that's the technical side. I think now it's time to switch to like politics and what is industry doing and where are the battlegrounds that we're all facing. So their targets, which make them our targets, are at the facility level, which we've talked a lot about so far, at state laws and regulations to make it easier to build new facilities, and federal laws and regulations to make it easier to build new facilities. And then this whole narrative, which avoids the conversation of whether plastic reduction is necessary or it should be the priority, right? So the chemical recycling narrative itself is the battleground that we all need to be tracking and watching and engaging in. So I want to talk a bit about state legislation. I've noticed some of the folks in this who are here today do a lot of state policy work. That's awesome. And for others who might not, I want to give some sort of grounding in what we're seeing in terms of state legislation from the industry. So in a moment, I'm going to show the states where where the American Chemistry Council and the plastics industry has decreased regulation for these types of facilities in the last few years. But first, I want to talk about what it is they're trying to do. So in state legislatures, what the plastic industry is trying to do and the petrochemical industry is trying to do is to basically avoid the regulation that comes in for an incineration facility, because that costs them money. They don't want to have anything to do with that. They would prefer to operate as any sort of manufacturing site without needing to meet the additional requirements that come in for an incineration facility. It's expensive. Now, I say all of this, even with that increased level of regulation for incineration, it's still inadequate, completely inadequate. Our laws around incineration, our emission standards around incineration, totally inadequate. But they're more than for any standard manufacturing site. So what the plastic industry is trying to do is to avoid even a minimum of more regulation, because that saves them money. So they're trying to get exempt or deregulated out of incineration categories. So the way they're doing that, you can see it if you go into the legislation that they're trying to pass or putting forward in all these states, is to simply say all of these technologies, chemical recycling, gasification, pyrolysis, solvolysis, advanced recycling, all sorts of other terms. They basically put a huge laundry list of things in there. And they said, these are no longer considered incineration. These are no longer considered waste facilities. They will not require any additional waste facility permits. They will not require any air emissions permits. They are now manufacturing. So that's the major play that we're seeing at the state level, is deregulating, changing laws to avoid regulation as incineration. Even though, as Jan and I keep saying, these are clear, straight up incinerators, okay? Just be clear. So it's all a name game. Another way that they're trying to do this is to add chemical recycling, pyrolysis, gasification. I've seen it all listed in a lot of detail in different states, to add all of that, advanced recycling, all of their terms, into the state's definition of recycling, because that's a way of getting at the first thing we just talked about. It's a way of getting at a justification for avoiding incineration regulations. And it's a way for them to have additional incentives, motivations, agreements with cities, contracts, all of that to serve as recycling providers. So on this side, they're trying to get more incentives. So you got to watch for tax breaks, you got to watch for other handouts, as well as really blatant, calling this stuff recycling, saying it's not incineration, saying it's not waste. So that's what we're seeing. And these are the states. So far, there's 20 states that American Chemistry Council has passed laws like this, or the plastics industry has passed laws. This is the first page. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to be depressing, but this is the deal. Like we all need to know the landscape, and we need to know if we're in one of these states that local sites are going to be at a disadvantage, because we won't be able to call on incineration regulations, Title V permits, all sorts of stuff. It's going to be much harder to slow down a facility in these states, because the normal protections one would have around a facility are not there. It doesn't mean you can't win. By no means doesn't mean you can't win, but it means it's going to be a fight, and some of the things one might expect are not going to be there. So we're at a disadvantage. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so these are the first states. I'm going to go on to the list, the second states. The ones in dark red are laws that have passed since 2020. We did a legislative alert on state policy in 2020 that showed all the states in the lighter pink color. And then these are the sort of ongoing battlegrounds that we expect. These are bills that did not pass in the past 2 years, but were introduced in Alabama, New Jersey, Michigan, Rhode Island, New York. And so either these bills are still under consideration or they've been blocked, but the industry definitely went after these states. So again, if you're in one of these states, you probably already know this, but watch out. The industry is probably coming back. So I don't mean to say all of this to be negative or depressing. I think we actually have a lot of opportunity to fight these laws, because once you dig into and you show the truth telling like Jandas did, we have a lot to debunk. A lot of what they're built on is smoke and mirrors. A lot of the claims that this industry is making are not defensible and can be easily dismantled. But it takes diligence. It takes really being willing to to go into the details and push back. And we can do it. We have to do it. So that's the state level. At the federal level, it's basically the same story. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but just imagine what I just described. Same for the federal level. Industries right now trying to introduce a bill in Congress that would deregulate, just as I said. They're also trying to do this through, the Trump administration started this process through a regulatory process. So, sorry. The Trump administration started a process already that many folks on this call and many others in the Break Free from Plastic movement have already provided formal comments on, in order to prevent the deregulation of gasification and pyrolysis from incineration. And then there's also pushes from EPA, from other federal agencies, Department of Energy, like calling them recycling, calling them, or giving them grants, stuff like that. So plenty to do. Really look forward to working with all of you. And I wanted to leave you with questions to ask about any type of facilities, local facilities or policy. We'll send these around. I won't go through all of these, but it's really essential that policymakers are armed with these questions, that they're prepared to take these on and to demand robust answers, not just to let them, not some sort of brush off from the industry, but actual fact-based answers. So that's our website where we've got a lot of this stuff compiled, and I'd be happy to talk. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jan and Monica, for those fantastic presentations. We do have some time here for questions, so I would encourage people to drop them in the chat, or if you're not comfortable with the chat, you can use the raise your hand feature or wave your hands or something. We'll find a way to call on you. I'm going to start going through the chat to find some of the questions from earlier, so please feel free to drop them in there. One quick question that came over near the top of the hour from Bonnie, where it said that in New Hampshire, the governor justifies, I assume, advanced chemical recycling as a necessary way to reduce waste in landfills. Can we have a response to that, with either Jan or Monica? If you're both muted, do either of you have a response to that? Basically, the whether or not we actually need to have some form of chemical recycling, otherwise our landfills will just get too big and will be consumed by landfills someday.
I mean, I think I or like half the people on this list or on this call would say plastic reduction, plastic reduction, plastic reduction. Like we have to go for strong policy moves that reduce plastic, period. And take that same energy about not wanting that landfill to stay open, take that energy and turn it into plastic reduction policies.
Yeah,
not to mention
and
composting, et cetera. So.
And seeing that we've shown, certainly for pyrolysis, that Brightmark's going to combust 70% of it, that's moving that waste into the sky. There was actually a really good article by Joe Brock with Reuters about Indonesia, where Unilever is paying for a plastic waste dump to be incinerated. And a local person there said they're moving the landfill into the sky. And so anytime you see incineration, that's what we're doing. So that's just not a solution. It's not a solution. It's carbon, it's pollutants, it's everything else. It's arguably worse than having it somewhere secure in the ground if we're all breathing it.
Thank you. There was another comment in the chat. A bunch of them are coming through as comments. I'm trying to rephrase them as questions, but one of them was the plastic industry has in essence bought the university that one of our attendees, Michael, was retired from. Do we have much evidence of a captive academia as a result of this? Yeah, go ahead, Jen. Oh, you're on mute.
You have to let me. It keeps not allowing me to, just so you know.
Okay.
When I click it, it says I can't talk, which I'm not taking personally. Yes, so the US Department of Energy is spewing out money to universities to study advanced recycling. And you see these, and I did graduate school at Berkeley, so I know how this works. Professors have to get funding in order to have programs. So they're all out there trying to get money. And the US DOE, through several mechanisms, is funding advanced recycling. They are not funding studies on waste reduction and reuse. So that this is literally being funded by the government, and the output is to get some headlines. And we see these stupid headlines come by on enzymes, on all these false solutions by universities that have been funded by the government. So academics cannot be trusted.
It's really, really too bad. We need our academics. Another question came through about the char and the wastewater from the facilities. Where is that being discharged? And you're both unmuted.
You want to go first, Jan?
Yeah, I'll take the water and wastewater, and you can do the char. So really, so for pyrolysis facilities, and now we're seeing this, pyrolysis are really the only ones up and operating. But the pure cycle would be a solvent process. And what we're seeing is that they have to get very, very clean feed in. I saw a question, can they take mixed plastic waste? No, they cannot. None of these can. Like pure cycle has to take very pure polypropylene. Okay, so what they're pushing into this plant in Winter Garden, Florida, they went and are literally bullying a city, an EJ community, to have a plastic trash sorting plant. And they went in originally to make it actually a flaking plant so that they could bring in plastic trash from across the whole Southeast, grind it up, and then ship it up to their plant that hasn't operated in Ohio to do their solvent process. Okay, well, the city's totally fighting back on it. They don't want it. And the original plan was actually to use a bunch of water from a resource in the lake that doesn't have enough water for people, and then to discharge the wastewater into the system, which actually waters people's lawns, for heaven's sakes. And it would be laden with PFAS. All waste is laden with PFAS, let alone everything else. So PureCycle's plan was literally to spread PFAS on everybody's yard in Winter Garden, okay? And that's gonna be the truth for any kind of plastic recycling, mechanical recycling, any others, but especially for a mixed waste. The pyrolysis facilities themselves, I think, are gonna be getting in pellets, so it may be happening somewhere else. And Monica, what about the char?
I don't know much about where the char would be going. I think what we're seeing more of is that there's all sorts of plastics that aren't even getting processed. And so that's solid waste that's going to go somewhere. And
the reality is these plants aren't operating.
Right. And so it's all theoretical. A lot of it is very theoretical. They're going to tell you, oh, we're going to find some industry that's going to take our char. I guarantee that's what they'll say, but.
And there's another related comment, I think, from the same person about, do these so-called advanced recycling facilities take special care to handle the toxic waste they produce? So I would assume they're regulated under hazardous waste rules that has to be taken to specific locations. If not, why not?
Well, we would need effective federal regulations for something like that. I mean, I think even with regular, your general mass burn incinerator, and Jane Williams, if you're still on and you want to pipe in, correct.
She has her hand up.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of those don't even send their waste to any sort of, special landfill that goes to the landfill. And so there's a lot of landfills across the country that are taking incinerator ash. So we, even though we want them to have a higher bar of regulation, we still need that regulation to be up here, and right now it's down here.
Jane, did you have anything to add to that, since she mentioned you? You are on mute.
Great.
There you go.
Yeah, just to cut to the point, I think so much of this is about words, because why is char any different than ash? But like they're trying to basically say, like, it's something different, and it's benign, and it's We'll spread it on your breakfast cereal. It'll be good for you. It's the same thing they said about coal ash. It's the same thing they said about incinerator ash, right? It's so much of this is about changing the words so that it's difficult for the public to really grasp what's going on. But I really wanted to say something different, and that is that if you think about sort of the history of the anti-pollution, activities in our country over the last 100 years, and you look at the storyline of PCBs, where PCBs were originally made starting in the 30s, and then really ramped up production 40s, 50s, 60s. And then we figured out how to find them in breast milk and cord blood and whale fat, and oh my God, PCBs are everywhere. We polluted the entire planet with PCBs. And Congress finally takes action in 1976 and says, hey, we can't make this stuff anymore. Like the production of PCBs are banned, okay? And then in the Stockholm Convention in the early 90s, the entire global community said no more PCBs, right? And it was largely because we found it in cord milk, cord blood, and breast milk, and the placenta, and it's a mess. Look at plastic. The ramp up from plastic has been occurring since the end of the Second World War. Plastic production has really ramped up in the last 20 years. Now we've got plastic, the top of Mount Everest, in the whales, in the Arctic, in the placenta, in cord blood, in breast milk. And what are we proposing? To triple production by 2050 globally. So I just wanted to kind of give us all a little bit of perspective, right, on where we're headed here. Like, we are literally going to be awash in plastic. And the fossil fuel industry wants to switch fossil fuel production from going into transportation fuels and going into plastic production. And they've got to have something to point to, that no, we can capture all this plastic and we can recycle it and make it circular. So like they need advanced recycling to keep their business model going. That's why they're fighting so hard to hold on to it and to keep it. So I just wanted to kind of give that perspective, like that's what we're up against here, right?
Thank you.
I really applaud everybody who's on this call. It's amazing to see that there's been almost 50 people on this. And thank you so much to Jan and Monica. The presentations are awesome, just amazing. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thanks, Jane. Great to have you here. I see that Diana Cohen has her hand up, and we'll probably have time for a few more. I'll go back to the chat to see more questions. Go ahead, Deanna.
Thank you. Yeah. It's Deanna. Hi. Okay. Not exactly a question, but Jan and Monica, obviously, thank you for all the work that you're doing. I feel like we need to maybe back out for a second because we can go in the weeds pretty fast with all the little details, which I totally appreciate. And I want to share this with our staff. But, what do you think is the overarching approach on this? Just each of you, I'm curious. And obviously, thank you to everybody for organizing this, including our team.
You want to go first, Jan?
Oh, the overarching approach. So I just typed in some comments. Yes, that someone, first of all, I don't think any of us are arguing against all plastics. Of course, there's use for plastics in hospitals and medicine and phones that last a long time. But this massive amount of single-use plastics and packaging, which represents about 50%, 60% of plastic that's made, and it's what we find in developed countries in the environment, in 3 billion people in other parts of the world don't even have access to any kind of waste management. But it's those plastics that are unnecessary, and we can solve them through reuse, through water refill stations, and through better types of packaging. That is what we need to, I think that's what we're all talking about. To me, that's the overarching, that we absolutely have to reduce through refill, reuse, bigger containers, and then alternate types as well. I'm a fan of, there's some good fiber solutions coming on for like candy bars. Okay, I don't think we're ever going to get a refill for that, but they're compostable. There's no plastics in them, and I think that would be far better than plastic, which kills species and lasts in the environment forever. That's the last beach cleanup strategy.
And I would say, I think many or all of you are part of Break Free from Plastic. And I just think that overarching framework of pushing on industry in all these different ways at the petrochemical facilities at the top, as well as, corporate campaigns to push for accountability, and the place that I'm more familiar with around policy and local fights, and making sure that as we call for policy about how we want to reduce plastic and the strategies for that, that we're being really explicit that industry's false solutions are not part of the accepted pathway. Like they're an escape valve. And so we need to be being really proactive about explaining that escape valve needs to be closed, and that state policy, federal policy can't allow new opening, because that undermines all of the work at the top, that the larger movement's doing. So I really appreciate how much people have, many organizations are being so explicit about that. I think it's really, really huge, and essential to be taking on the industry's narrative, and making it clear what's acceptable and what's not.
That's great. I think that actually answered a few of the other questions that had come in here. And I would also, there was one question from Patience about the facility in Florida that was mentioned. Do we know offhand where that one is located? Or there was also the link on the NRDC study, which actually showed locations of facilities around the country.
Yeah, it's actually, and Jackie put some information in here. This is actually just a trash sorting plant. It's not even a chemical recycling plant, which just shows you the impacts all along the way. It's in Winter Garden, Florida, which is near Orlando, historically Black, economically disadvantaged community. That's how they like to be described. And there's a tiny parcel of county-owned land that PureCycle's come in and made a deal, but it's completely surrounded by the city. And the city says, no, we don't want it. Neighbors are next door. It's a fire hazard. We don't want this here. And PureCycle is shoving this thing through. So we're mobilizing to help the city, help the community stop what would be just a terrible nuisance hazard facility in their neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that follow-up. We are at the top of the hour. We got a lot of questions in. We had some great presentations. I'd like to thank everyone for how engaged this is. Let's definitely continue the conversation. This is going to wrap it up. I don't know if Gabby, you have any final words to add here. We will send out some notes from today's call with some of the links, and feel free to save the chat if you want to preserve any of those links, but we'll send out follow-up communication. So thanks everyone for attending, and feel free to come off mute, and wish everyone a good day, and thanks again to our presenters.
Everyone is muted, so no one.
Everyone's muted. They can't come off mute. Okay. We assume that you're all cheering us on. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time.